Let's head back to the farm and check on Pearl. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well out there, and I hope you all had a great Christmas out there. We're now only a few days away from New Year's Eve, and this will be my last review until after New Year's. My next review will be the remake of Terror Train. I'm going to do the sequel to that remake. It's dropping on Tubi on New Year's Day, I believe. But today we're going to talk about a prequel to one of my favorite horror movies of the year, X, and this one is called Pearl. I finally got the chance to sit down and watch this film. I didn't get to see it in the theaters back in the fall, but I rectified that last night by watching that Blu-ray right there. And we're going to talk about it right now because I have a lot to say about this one. Pearl was directed by Ty West. He also co-wrote this film with Mia Goth, the star of this film, and this one dropped back in September 16th of this year, had a budget of $1 million, and upon release it made 9.4. Now, the main star, the main attraction of this film is Mia Goth as Pearl. Now, in X, Mia Goth played Pearl as well as her younger counterpart character in the film, and this time she got to explore the younger version of Pearl back in 1918 instead of 1979 where X took place. This is a very different Pearl, very much younger, living with her parents on that same farm. Her dad is infirmed in a chair from the Spanish influenza, and her mother's very hard on Pearl. But there's a reason why her mother might be a little hard on Pearl, because Pearl has some mental instability, as we'll say. And they show that right out of the gate. Now, Pearl is very bubbly and pleasant to a point until she thinks you're not on her side, and then she becomes a totally different person. She helps her mom out with her father, cleaning him up, feeding him, bathing him, but Pearl has her sights set on Hollywood or being on a stage performing for folks. She has definitely aspirations beyond this farm, and she wants to get out of this farm which she thinks is holding her back, and her mother, which she thinks is holding her back. And as we see, as the movie goes along, we see her kill a goose and feed it to the alligator. The alligator reappears in this film just like X. And as the film goes along, they definitely show Pearl's mental state declining. And we see her going to town and get medicine for her father, and she likes going to the movies because she fantasizes about being in movies. And she is in an alleyway after the one showing, and she happens to meet the projectionist. We don't know his name. He's just called the projectionist through the film. This young man who was in the war, came back, and he works for this theater, and he tells her that she can come back anytime to knock on the side door, and he can show her any film she wants to watch if he has the film upstairs. And he's very supportive of her. It's almost like, and I saw an interview with Mia Goth, and she said in her mind, she thinks projectionist is a figment of Pearl's imagination because he's so supportive, and all her wants and desires are projected onto this imaginary person. I don't know. It kind of makes sense once you see the film unfold, but I think he's a real person. I just think she's so caught up in what her desires are that she'll do almost anything to make that a reality. And she does some pretty awful things to some folks thinking that they're holding her back or going against her. We see her confrontations with her mother. Her mother's definitely overbearing, but it all culminates in this dinner scene where Pearl is telling her mother about her aspirations, and she has to try. She doesn't want to be stuck here in this farm, and she just wants her mom to give her this one shot because there's going to be a dance tryout at this church in town, and she wants to go and try out because she has to at least give it a shot. And if she doesn't make it, she'll come back to the farm and do her chores and no longer espouse for these things. She'll just settle into farm life and helping her mother take care of her father. And they end up getting this heated argument because this whole time her mother is very overbearing and even a little bit over the top. But in this moment, we see why. Her mother reveals that she knows there's something wrong with Pearl, and that's why she stays on top of her, because she's afraid she's going to hurt somebody. And what culminates is a shoving match between Pearl and her mother, and Pearl pushes her up against the fireplace, and her mother catches fire. And once she puts her fire out, but her mother's all disfigured and scarred on her face, drags her down in the cellar and leaves her there, comes back up, and then a couple scenes later, she smothers her father and kills him. She kills the projectionist with a pitchfork in a pretty cool scene where you see Pearl really start to become unhinged. And then she goes to this tryout, and her best friend Mincy is also trying out. And we see Mincy earlier in the film, but after the tryout, Pearl does not get picked, and she has a total breakdown inside the church. And Mincy comes out and says, "Come on, I'll give you a ride home." And she takes her home, and they go into the house. And Mincy starts thinking something's a little bit off here. And Pearl says about how she slept with the projectionist, and we see that during the film. But this is the scene that really, there's horrific moments for sure, but it's a slow burn just like X. But this scene, Mia Goth rocks this scene. I mean, she rocks the whole movie, but this one scene, she sits down at the table with Mincy, and she starts confessing to Mincy that she thinks something's wrong with her, and that she cheated on her husband Howard, who's off at the war, and she's worried that people are going to start thinking less of her because of some of the things she does. And Mincy, being the friend she is, she goes, "Well, to help you practice on how to tell Howard when he gets back about how you feel, pretend I'm Howard." And this scene goes on, like Pearl's monologue, or Mia Goth's monologue, goes on, from what I read, I didn't time it, but 7 minutes and 57 seconds, where she just pours everything out like she's speaking to her husband. And the look on Mincy's face, she even brings up about how she killed the projectionist and her mother and her father, and that she's sorry about some of these things, but she just felt she was being held back, and these people were all against her, but now she kind of regrets it. And the look on Mincy's face when the camera does happen to cut back to her, which it doesn't very often, you could just see her almost she's shocked and scared. And when Pearl's done, she excuses herself, goes outside to leave, and Pearl kills her with an axe in a great scene where you can see Pearl pulling the axe out of a tree stump and starts chasing her down the dirt road, and she just keeps whacking her in the back and kills her. And it basically all culminates where Pearl puts her mother and her father, even though they're dead, at the dinner table, and she says her prayers, and then it cuts to her cutting up Mincy's body and throwing it to the alligator. And then finally at the end of the film, Howard comes home to Pearl, and Mia Goth turns around and with this crazed smile on her face, where the camera locks on her through most of the credits, and that's the end of Pearl. And I gotta be honest, this is probably, I loved X. In all the best ways, Ty West gave us a great horror film, at least in my opinion. I know some people it didn't work for them. For me, it worked immensely. And that was my favorite horror film up until this point. Pearl, after watching this last night, what a great fucking horror film. Now, that's my opinion. You may not feel the same way. But this movie, besides the directing by Ty West, which he directs the shit out of this, and it definitely went a totally different direction than X, where X was more like a grindhouse type film. It's even shot that way. This is shot like a Technicolor Wizard of Oz almost type of film. It's very bright colors and very vivid. And I love that aesthetic and going in that direction, and the way just the title sequences, it's like very old school. I was there for it. But this movie hinges on, besides the directing being great, which I think it is really greatly directed here by Ty West, this whole movie hinges on Mia Goth's performance. And this woman should get nominated for an Oscar for this performance, in my opinion. She is fucking fantastic. She is a rock star in this movie. She was a rock star in X, but here, the spotlight's on her. She carries the whole movie. All the other actors are great in their roles, but it really hinges on her performance, or this movie would not work. And her co-writing with Ty West, I'm sure, helped, and she just owns this role, and she's fantastic. And by the time you get to that monologue at the end of the film, when she's sitting there in her dining room with Mincy, and she just keeps going and going and going about all the things she's done and all these feelings she has as she's talking to her husband, whom she misses greatly, she is amazing in this role. Again, she should get nominated for an Oscar. Will she? Probably not, because it's a horror film, and most of the time in horror films they get ignored by the Academy. And I don't even watch the Oscars anymore, but she deserves to be nominated at the very least. She gives an amazing performance. Not just in that monologue throughout the whole film, but that monologue really solidifies her performance throughout the whole movie. When the horror hits and she kills somebody, they don't shy away from the gore. It is graphic for sure. I wouldn't say this movie is scary. There's more unsettling parts than just seeing her mental stability just degrading in front of us as the movie goes on. And it's a sight to behold. My eyes were glued to the screen. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. The way it's shot and her performance, it's fantastic. The set design looks great, like it did in X. I thought the set looks great in X. Now it's just new, looks newer and more vivid because of the way it's being shot. I can't say enough good things about this movie. This is my favorite horror movie of the year, hands down. Nothing comes close to it. X would be a close second. Black Phone, Scream, the new Scream movie, and et cetera, et cetera. But this is definitely my favorite movie of 2022, horror movie wise. It's just a great horror film in my opinion. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And hats off to Ty West and Mia Goth for rocking this performance. This movie wasn't originally planned when he went to New Zealand to make X. Before they started shooting, Mia Goth and Ty West wrote this script over FaceTime sessions. And they sent it off to A24 not thinking they'd say yes to it. And they did say yes to it. And it had $1 million budget, and so they gave him $1 million to make this film, and they shot it simultaneously with X, which I thought was pretty cool, because I remember when I saw this back in the springtime with my buddy Dale _ from the Bad Spider podcast, I didn't even know this movie was shot. They shot it secretly, and at the end of X, and they showed a teaser trailer for this, I'm like, what the hell's this? And it looked so fascinating, and I'm glad I got to sit down and watch this last night. Originally, this movie was meant to be shot in black and white. That was what Ty West and Mia Goth saw for this film. A24 really didn't care for that, so Ty West decided to shoot it in like a Technicolor kind of way, in a very vivid colors, total opposite of what X was, and I thought that was pretty cool. And when Pearl goes up to audition for these judges at this church for this dance thing, there's an X on the floor, which is where dancers are supposed to start off. It's supposed to be their mark, but actually that was also a callback and a shout out to X, which I thought was pretty cool. And Pearl's smile at the end of the film, at the end of the film, it ends on her smile, and the camera holds on her. And that was unplanned. It goes on for I think just under 2 minutes. And you can even see tears going down her face as she starts shaking. That's because Mia Goth was actually she was just melting down waiting for Ty West to yell cut, and he didn't. And he just decided to leave it in the film. And it is kind of unsettling watching her smile like that through the credits, because I watched through the credits, and it definitely works in conjunction with the rest of this film. I can't say enough good things about this film. It really worked for me. It's my favorite horror movie of 2022. And at the end of the day, I would give Pearl a 9.75 out of 10. I liked it that much. Yes, a 9.75 out of 10 for Pearl. Have you seen it yet? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. If you did see it, do you prefer this or X? Let me know down below as well. Hit the thumbs up and subscribe button. Share this video. I would appreciate that. I'll be back after New Year's.